Hello and welcome back to Ginger Kid Outdoors. Today I'm going to be going over my newest acquire, the Sig Sauer M18. Now, previous video I had out the M17. I've got this one reconfigured with the enhanced straight bow trigger and the X long frame, which will be a full dust cover. Now with the M18, it's going to be a little bit shorter. Instead of being a 4.7 inch, we're looking at a 3.9 inch barrel. And you're looking at the standard carry grip frame on it. Still same 17 round magazine is what the full size variant's going to carry. Going to be the same ambidextrous slide stop and safety controls, and of course a magazine release which is swappable from the left and right side. So if you're a right-hander or left-hand shooter, you can have this handgun configured to either way you want to. Now there is one interesting note that the M18 and the M17, get this one out. Now neither one of these two have the 320 designation on the slide like the 320-17 and the 320-18 do. And I'll have a little graphic up in the video up here to show you the difference in the milling that is actually in. For starters, the rear sights do not extend out past the actual rear lip here. These rear sights are flush with that, and there's a screw that comes up to engage that rear sight. And there is a lip that goes in the front of this slide to actually hold this entire plate assembly down. Now, it's still going to be compatible with the Delta Point Pro footprint and of course the M17 red dot by Sig Sauer, which the 320 is not compatible with that red dot specifically for the M17. So that is one interesting piece there. And another thing I'd like to see is somebody come out with a plate system for the M18 and the M17 that will allow you to utilize your pre-existing rear sight, because this sight will actually come out of this plate. It's actually a two-piece system. You've got your sight that sits in a tray in the back of the plate to hold the plate on there. Now, if they could come out with a different optics plate that you could actually have your different footprint set for, and then you could hopefully co-witness with your rear sight there. I don't know if that'd be something C&G could do, or if Sig Sauer themselves should actually start thinking about doing this. Kind of cut down on what you need for additional parts in order to basically configure this with a red dot, something other than that M17 red dot, because that red dot is $700. I believe it's $699 right now, and the handgun's usual map price is $650. So you're looking at an optic that's more expensive than the handgun it's going to go on, which is just crazy. But my next section of the video, we're going to go over the differences on the difference between the 18 and the 17, and compare the 17, not the 17, the 18 I should say, to the XMACRO by Sig Sauer, which is their compact handgun, which coincidentally is a 17 round magazine as well, with a 3.7 inch barrel. So size wise they're very similar, but width wise they are quite a difference in them, and we'll be showing you that coming up next. Okay, so with the M18 here, we'll first start by comparing magazines. And you can see that base plate to base plate on the tabletop here, the M18, M17, the standard 320 17 round magazine, is a little bit longer. Width wise, it is just a hair wider than what the XMACRO magazine is going to be, or your P365 17 rounder. Of course, your base plates are going to be quite a bit slimmer between the two of them. But, I mean, obviously the magazines won't interchange. She'll go in, but she won't do anything from there. I mean, it actually does get stuck. And of course, this is too wide to go in. Now, as far as, like, both have safeties on, I did go with the option with the safety on that one. But for your size comparison, when you want to look at them side by side, come here, lined up. Oh, let's see. I'm going to try to get the chambers lined up. So you can see a difference in the XMACRO is a little bit shorter all the way around. Of course, it is a 3.7 versus the 3.9 on the Sig Sauer, but even just like the width-wise, how much wider these handguns are between each other. And of course, both handguns are of course unloaded. I don't actually have any 9mm ammo because UPS managed to lose my package that I had coming from Palmetto State that I'd ordered 400 rounds of 9mm NATO in 124 grain Winchester, more Valor boxes and 200 round count boxes. So right now UPS is trying to figure out where that is, and Palmetto has a what'd you call it, a claim out to try to either recoup the loss for the parcel, because it's also got 5 boxes of 5.56 in it, so it's about $200 I should say worth of ammo that just disappeared from UPS when it made it to Hotchkiss, Illinois, which is coincidentally the only place to go after that's going to be Dodgeville, and then it gets delivered. So I mean, it's one stop away from getting delivered. It was supposed to be delivered last Friday, and here it is Saturday before Labor Day, and nobody has any idea where the package went, so that's always promising. But back to the handguns, you can kind of see a difference. I don't know how the best way to kind of show you. In just like your differences in slides. Another thing I noticed too is your trigger versus where your chamber is. The trigger is actually right behind the chamber where the XMACRO. It sits a little bit more toward the back third of the chamber, so your actual chamber is sitting a little bit farther back to where your hand placement's going to be versus what like your Sig Sauers and stuff for the 320 line is. So everything is going to be a little bit more farther forward of your trigger. I mean, realistically, when it comes to trigger, muzzle flip, I should say, not trigger, but muzzle flip, anything you've got farther out from this point, you're going to have more. It's kind of like on a principle of a bullpup. Everything is closer back here. You're going to actually have more of a balanced system. So that is kind of an interesting part that they did with the 365 XMACRO here, having just a little bit farther back, not by a whole lot, but just a little bit more. It's almost perfectly centered in the trigger guard, or even this you can see is not perfectly centered in the trigger guard. It's favoring the front portion of it. So kind of an interesting little piece to actually look at there. Next, however, we'll go over the differences, other than just size, what actually is the internal makeup differences of both of the Sig M17 and the M18. Because the biggest difference is going to be not only the barrel length, but your recoil guide rod. So we'll be going into that. That'll be coming up next. Okay, so basic disassembly, let's get into that. You'll lock your slide to the rear, while your takedown lever, rotate it around, just slide it right off. Now in the original configuration, and the M18 is a lot stiffer because of its guide rod system. But I was just getting into is the M18 and the M17 originally come with this carry size grip to it. I, of course, as I mentioned, put the longer full-size X-frame on it. So, but as far as that, everything else is the same. The only thing that's different is the trigger on this is the standard factory trigger, and this is a Sig Sauer enhanced trigger. This is an all stainless steel trigger. I don't think they ever say what the material is on this one. But the other thing to note is the trigger poundage on this particular handgun was around 6 pounds 7 ounces. Now when I put this trigger in the full size, this trigger is around 4 pounds 6 ounces. So there's over a 2 pound difference, and all it is a trigger. So I am interested to see. I did the $150 rebate on the M18, so I'll be doing some more shopping on the old Sig store to take a look at getting a enhanced flat bow trigger for this, and I might actually go with the X compact grip and get some 15 round magazines and turn my M18 here into an M18X carry as opposed to a full-size 17 round grip. I haven't decided yet, since I will have to get a different magazine for that with a 15 rounder versus a 17 or the 21 rounders, which I'll need sleeves for those. Otherwise there's going to be a little bit of a gap exposed at the bottom. but we'll see what's available and what I can get there. Now with the frames out of the way, of course, the whole trigger mechanism, I showed that on my previous video on the 17, how you can easily take the entire fire control group out. Now with the 17, it's going to of course have a longer barrel because that's the nature of that beast. But the big difference is going to be your guide rods. Both all metal guide rods. You have a 2-piece guide rod system here for the M18 and a 1-piece guide rod system for the M17. Interesting thing is this is a heavier poundage for the 3.9-inch barrel for spring weight than what it is for the 4.7-inch barrel. Now I don't know if they did that just because what their theory is behind it, but I wouldn't mind getting a heavier recoil spring for this just to kind of help mitigate some of what I've got for barrel flip. You can already see after shooting probably about 150 rounds through this so far, it has got a lot of gunk on the inside of it already. A lot of little brass shavings are all over the inside of it, which you will find that pretty common. But with a lot of the issues they've been having with these 320s, with the strikers and everything going off, and people saying they have an uncommanded discharges, I'm going to get into a little bit of that because I have found some stuff with this M18 that is not will not do it on the M17. But I did find out another little piece of information where it stops going off when you do something else to it, which makes a lot more sense as to if you're going to carry it. That'll be coming up in the next section, but in the meantime we'll get back to kind of doing a slight little disassembly. Of course you can see the difference on the lug systems down here. Of course the M18 is going to have a shorter lug system than what the M17 is. That's why the M17 is able to use that carry style grip with the shorter dust cover on it for the front end, which is why I went over to the full length. I do like the more clean look to it. And then of course pretty much going to be the same style of cold hammer forged barrel, just shorter and a longer one for the two different frames. So this assembly is pretty well straightforward. On the M17, sure we grab my right grip frame. Now of course, as I mentioned, the M17 grip will work perfectly fine on the M7. Well, the 18 grip I've got here will work perfectly fine because this is essentially the same grip module that came with my 17 originally. So that is all back together. Do a quick little function test, and it does work with the safety. Does not work, I should say, with the safety on. Dry fires like normal. Okay. Now I found when you're putting this together, I was having all kinds of problems and I couldn't get this gun to actually reassemble. You've got flats on the back of your 2-piece guide rod. Now what is important on that is when you're putting this back in here, you want to make sure those flats go to the outside and you get them lined up as flush and even as possible when you've actually got that back in place. Otherwise, for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get the slide back on the frame. But once I got that figured out, I just make sure I got that all back together. And again, works perfectly fine without it. And discharges just like it's supposed to with pulling the trigger. And these firearms will fire without having a magazine in. There is no magazine disconnect for the actual system. That is part of, I believe, a requirement for the U.S. military is the handguns and rifles have to be able to fire with no magazines inserted, just to be on the safe side in case you may be getting a fight and somebody manages to eject your magazine. Your gun's not worthless yet. You still have one round left in that chamber. But going up next, I'm going to go over some of the stuff I found with this M17, which was doing, M18 I should say, which was doing the same thing with an uncommanded discharge by putting a little piece of either like a screw or what I've been using is torque bits there and being able to pull down on the nose of the handgun, and it you can hear the sear release, and you can basically hear the gun just fire. Which, now with that being said, if you've got any back pressure like this, you're pulling the trigger back. Doesn't matter if it's being done mechanically or if it's being done by you. that trigger is still coming back. And what I should actually do before we go into that next step is explain a little bit as to what's happening on the inside of this gun, because it seems like a lot of people aren't doing that very well. Rotate that back up. You'll push your slide stop back up, and that will reset everything inside that gun. Now, the first thing I'm going to mention is when you're pulling that trigger back, there's going to be a small little piece here that is going to come up, and that much movement there has already got enough travel to push the striker safety all the way up and disengage the actual safety of the striker. So this much movement has already disengaged that striker safety. Now, any more movement you got from there, you're now starting to pull back on the sear. And of course, that is going to lower the sear the more you pull it back. And you have a little bit of play there before it'll actually release it. It's got a secondary sear trip on, not a trip, but a sear engagement to grab it in case it accidentally slips off it. But at this point, you've already pulled the trigger back 3/4 of the way before it's actually going to break. So the gun's going to go off regardless. It doesn't matter what kind of safety is there. You're ultimately doing with the gun exactly what it was not fully designed to do, but about, like at this point, you're already about 7/8 of the way to getting it to ultimately do what you want it to do. So a lot of people have been having a lot of getting all excited over that, but I mean, if you're pulling the trigger back, even if you got something in there, your trigger's being pulled back. So that is one thing to take into consideration. Next, I'm going to show you some of the other stuff I had, and guess what I didn't do? Always make sure you re-engage your disassembly lever, or you try to reassemble your handgun. There we go. Next, I'm going to be going over some of what I thought was an issue in the beginning, and had a little bit of an aha moment, and now with what I found, it's not doing that uncommanded discharge anymore. Going to be getting to that next. Okay, so some of what I found, if I can do this properly, is as you're pulling the trigger down without a magazine in there, you can see a lot of movement between that slide and that frame. Now again, this is not with a magazine in there. And the reason that is there is a balance point. See if I can get this to refocus. I don't think it's focused very good. Hopefully that stays there. As you pull it back and forth, I don't know if you can see that this well on camera. Oh, I just got it to, yeah, there we go. But what you're seeing is the point here and back there with as much travel as there is back there. It's almost like it's just teetering on those 2 points, and that is exactly what it's doing. Now, when you add the magazine to it, it doesn't do it. And now I was saying the trigger pull, without a magazine in it, the trigger pull is probably closer to a little over 8 pounds. With a magazine in, there is no more play, and there is no more with that striker and the sear grasping against each other, trying to pull each other apart, which is an interesting little point. As you can see, I mean, it's a lot harder to get it to ride in that, but there is no movement anymore in between, and no rocking back and forth. Which, without the magazine in it, let's see, it's easier to do it this way. All it is it's the same thing you were seeing all over the internet. You get it pulled almost all the way back, and you just a little bit of front pressure to it, and that sear releases. Now, trying to find where it's going to stop at. I can sit there and push up and down on it all the time with the magazine in, and it won't do it. Now, that begs the question, when all those guys had like the little screws and stuff stuck in them, were the magazines in them or were the magazines out? Because I've watched a lot of those videos and I don't remember. That is an interesting little point to take into consideration. Now here we are with the M18, as you can see. She's empty. No magazine. There we go. Focus. Get it over here kind of more centered. Helps if I take the safety off. Now this still has some play in it even with the new trigger, but I don't think there's as much play in it with this trigger. And with the whole like having it partially back, I sat there and tried and tried and tried, even with the stock trigger in this and the original configuration, it just won't do it. Now I don't know what the difference is between the longer barrel on the M17. Oh, it's not going to focus. Well, as I mentioned, I don't know if there's a difference between the M17 and the M18, if that barrel length is kind of adding a little bit more force on the back to not allow it to do it, but it is interesting that all of the handguns I saw that people were using to get that uncommanded discharge were all in the carry configurations, and I don't remember seeing any full-size guns as well. So I don't know if that's something to take into consideration too. I was originally wondering if it had something to do with the actual recoil springs were imparting too much force going back on it, or if it was something with the fire control group and if the frames themselves were out of spec. But once I found out you put a magazine in and it doesn't do it anymore, I'm like, well, that's an interesting little change of opinion right there. So as I mentioned, I don't remember if anybody else on YouTube had the magazines in them or not. So the bugs are starting to get to me. I'm pretty much concluded that portion of my video. Pretty much do a little bit of a wrap up here. Disappointing I haven't had a chance to actually shoot the M18 yet because as I mentioned, I don't have any ammunition for it because UPS lost my package. So, but I did have a chance to actually shoot the M17 here with the X grip on it. As I mentioned, I am interested to see what I want to do with this next. So as far as not trusting the 320s or the M18s or any of that, I still think the, if you will, that the jury's still out on it. I don't know if anybody's got a clear, definite, yes, it's 100% firearm issue. No, it's not a firearm issue. I was originally looking at this when I realized that I could pull the trigger back partially with the magazine out, as I mentioned, and it would like have an uncommanded discharge. So I was looking at the actual tabs that hold the slide into the frame, the actual tabs on the fire control group, because some of them don't look like they're 100% like at a 90-degree angle. Some of them look like they've got like a slight tilt to them, and I was wondering if some of that could be an issue. But I mean, a lot of this stuff is probably bent in fixture jigs and all done like robotically, because I would imagine very few parts on this, with the exception of the actual assembling aspect of it. The actual manufacturing aspect of most of this is probably done with some sort of machines. So anytime you got the opportunity to take human error out of the equation is probably the best thing to do, unfortunately, these days, because, man, you're not going to have anybody that's going to step up and say, hey, these parts are bad. No, they're just going to throw them in there and get those guns out, because they probably got quotas they have to have met for assembly, and they want to try to get as much stuff out as what they can, because just like any other like manufacturing facility, they want to probably try to cut down on as much overtime as they can, because they want to go home on the weekends and not have to work like any overtime or anything like that if not possible. And of course, Sig Sauer, from a company aspect, they probably want to keep as much revenue in the black as opposed to the red. So yep, that being said, pretty much going to conclude my video for today, and I hope at least you find some of this stuff at least interesting, or maybe like informative. I don't know how many of you have actually bought like the any 320s. I looked at them originally when they first came out. Always wanted to get one of the M17s, so I'm glad I ended up getting one of the actual commercial versions of it as opposed to the 320 M17 from a collecting standpoint. The M18 and the M17, the actual commercial versions, I'm sure are going to have probably at least a better collector value on them than what the 320 variant is, considering it's not the actual military version that's been put out there. So yeah, if Sig Sauer does end up saying, no, we screwed something up with that handgun majorly, and they lose their military contract and discontinue this, you know, some of the stuff might actually be worth some money down the road, because I'm sure everybody right now is in a huge panic to get rid of it because they think there's something drastically wrong with it, and at any moment, if the gun's loaded, it's going to go off, which I don't know. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case for the 320 at all, or if this is just since we've seen an unprecedented amount of people online just looking to get views on their videos and whatnot. And after all, I look at YouTube as just something to basically occupy my time on the weekend with, because I work a full-time job to pay for all of this stuff, so I don't have anybody giving me money or doing anything like that. All my farmerrain plugs I do is for the actual benefit of them and not necessarily myself, because I think it's a great brand, and the individuals that own it I think are just fantastic people. And isn't that the whole reason why you should be trying to endorse the company, is because you're actually proud of what they do and who they are and what they make? So yeah, keep that in mind. And I guess in the next video coming up, I've got some trimming that's done, so I can hopefully get my MCX out finally and get the 1:8 primary arms LPVO I've got sighted in. It's my first optic to use mill, so talk about going from one language to another. Every optic I have, every red dot, anything that's got adjustments with the exception of one scope, is all in MOA. My tree systems I've got in several first focal plane, all MOA, and this is the first time I'm going to anything mill. How much you want to make a bet I'm going to be using a mill holdover when I'm thinking of MOA and completely just biff trying to like shoot coyotes and stuff here in the not so near future. That's kind of what I'm thinking is going to happen. But as always, I thank you for watching and sticking around for this long.